Hello everyone, my name's Mark. Please bear with me, I'm definitely not a YouTube video creator, but I do have a Jackson Kayak, a Kusa FD with the Flex Drive. And for the last year when I got it, I've had several problems with the drive on it, and I've seen that there's been other issues that other people have had with it out there. And the thing is, I couldn't find a video, I couldn't find pictures, I couldn't really find any information out there. Maybe I'm missing it, but couldn't really find anything that shows how the drive's put together, how it's assembled, what the issues might be. And so I decided to go ahead and put together a little video for it. I'll say right up front that even though I do have problems, I really do love that kayak, and the customer support with Jackson is just second to none. I can't say enough good things about their customer support. And I know when you have a problem with a product, you really do want to have that resolved as quickly as possible, and you know, to your satisfaction, and that doesn't usually happen this day and age with most companies. It's really rare. So when I do find it, I do really call it out and bring attention to the fact that their customer support is really fantastic. I wish I didn't have to use it, but with any new design, with new things, there are going to be issues. And the Flex Drive is still relatively new, and you know, you expect them to have bugs to work out, and I think they're handling it well. At least in my case, they've handled it well. Even to the extent that I did not buy this kayak new, I bought it used, and they immediately have been just Johnny on the spot with fixing the issues and addressing my issues from day one. When I purchased it. Anyway, the issues that I have had with it have been related to the Flex Drive and the Flex Drive shaft in particular, and they have indicated that has been a weak spot, and they have revised it at least a few times according to the tech support people that I've spoken to. In a lot of cases, I might just move on to something new, move on to a different product, move on to, you know, a native Propel or a Hobie Mirage drive or something that's seems to be a little more bulletproof and less problematic and more proven over the years. But the thing that led me to the Jackson Kayak was the Flex Drive and the ingenuity behind that, and the design. In my particular situation, it just works, and it works better than anything else so far. Now, the Hobie Mirage Drive has the new 180 kick-up fins. I'm going to be giving that a second look because that may work out well for me too. But the fact that in the very shallow water that I fish around here in northeastern Florida, and all of the oyster beds and everything, the fact that it's not a real clear water area, I'm right up on top of the sandbars. I'm right up on top of the oyster bars before I know it. And with the first, or actually the other, actually with the first kayak that I purchased, and the other one that I still do have, it's a native Titan with the Propel drive. And with the Propel drive, what I have found is that I really love it, and the drive seems to be pretty well bulletproof. It's a very stable kayak, but when I run up on an oyster bar with that, I cannot get the Propel drive up out of the water if I'm already too shallow. It gets kind of stuck, and if you don't have the prop vertical, you can't get it up through there. And so then you struggle with a push-pull and trying to get off of the sandbar, get off of the oyster bed. The issue with the Hobie Mirage drive is similar in that once you get stuck, if you bottom out on something, you have to get those fins back vertical again and straight down to be able to pull it out of the kayak as far as I know. So again, that would be a problem for me. And the thing I like about the Flex Drive is that you run into something and it just folds up right up into the hull of the kayak, and I really love that. It's worked exactly like I thought it would. It's worked perfect for me. So when I get into that super shallow water, I can just kind of kick it up, or it kicks itself up, and I can keep going even though it gets a little bit noisier. And when it gets too shallow for it in the halfway position, it can go all the way up into the hull, and I can pole or paddle. And it's worked out exactly like I hoped it would. So that's why I'm sticking with it and continue to really love the design, and hope that this third time that I've had a problem with it is the charm, and as far as getting it fixed. Anyway, the problem that I've had with this is the drive shaft from the second lower unit that they sent me as a replacement. I actually had a problem the first day I took out the used one that I purchased. I used it for a few hours, and then on the way back I really started pedaling hard, and all of a sudden it went slack. Pedals were just spinning freely, and you know, I put the drive up and looked at the prop, and it was kind of spinning, because I could see it was kind of hanging out the back, like it is here in this case. And you can see that shaft just sort of came apart on there. And if you look at the other end here, you can see the same thing. It's sort of that metal winding just sort of unwound. So anyway, I figured that, boy, I really got screwed on that purchase, and it's not going to be good, and it's going to cost me a lot of money to have it fixed. And I called, and just in a few minutes he got all my information and says, we'll have a new one out to you in a day or two. And he did. You know, 2 days later I had a brand new one, and it worked great for a while. And then again, just a few months ago, I had the same problem once again, coming across the intercoastal waterway over here near our house. And as I'm really pumping hard with it, and I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger by any means, not a biker or anything, and I would just, you know, I was pushing hard to get across the intercoastal before some more boats came up the channel, and it went slack again, and basically the same thing had happened. So again, you know, here's what's happened. The shaft's unwound, and they sent me another one, and that's the one that I've got right here. And that worked for a while, although pretty much from the time I got it, I could hear it making sort of a rubbing noise. And it would occasionally, I would hear this thump, thump, thump. As the pedals would go about 180-degree turn, I kept hearing this thump. And what I realized, that up here in the top, the upper unit that sits here on the top, as the pedals got to a certain position, it would go thump, thump, thump. It was just going back and forth, almost like it needed some wedges down in here. And it hadn't done that before, and the other ones had not done that. And I'm still not sure what was causing that. Because anyway, again, last week I had a problem with it again. It started making all the noise. The rubbing sound got particularly annoying. It was making enough noise that I thought, out on the flats I'm going to be spooking the fish. And it was intermittent. It didn't happen all the time, but it continually got worse. Couldn't figure out what was going on. The shaft did not break this time. So I called them, and once again they were right there to help me very quickly, and got my information. And again, you know, 2-3 days later, I've got their brand new 3D, I think they call it, Flex Drive system, and it's got a couple of improvements. They told me that they've made to the upper unit, although the upper unit hasn't caused me any issues so far, but they did replace it with a brand new one. And they sent me a whole new lower unit, and I think the main difference in it is that the Flex Drive shaft, I believe the tech that I was talking to told me that they're using stronger materials. There's a little bit of a redesign, and the windings are going in a different direction now. So apparently they have been dealing with these issues, and they're working real hard to fix it. And I'm really hoping this time that problem will be resolved for good. You know, it's hard to tell. I just got the new one put on the other day. It looks identical from the outside. The upper unit, the only difference that I can see is there are 2 more grease ports, little machine screws on the top to grease it in some new areas. So again, I haven't had any problems with that so far, but real excited about the new one. Hoping I won't ever see any more problems with it other than just your normal maintenance. But that's what I was dealing with. So anyway, go ahead and get onto this and take it apart just so everybody can see what you're dealing with in this. Don't need a lot of different tools. This was a 3/16 Allen wrench, and that works for most of the parts. I'm going to take off the little T-track up here on the top to begin with. And then there's basically 3 screws along the lower unit that's holding this thing together, and then also the little bungee across the back holds these 2 pieces together. So basically you have 2 sides with everything sandwiched in the middle. And the way to get this apart is you can see that there are these stainless nuts, lock nuts on this side are held in place. They're captured in place because they just fit in there tight. You don't have to have a wrench to hold those. You just need to, on this side, use your Allen wrench to get in there and loosen and take those off. So that one's out already. And let's get this one out. Got that one. And the final one. Okay, so have those done. And then the back, like I said, the thing that holds the bungees on, that's a through bolt also. And that's a 3/8. So you have to get on both sides of that and loosen it. And take those apart. And you can see that that's just one long one that holds it all together. And then basically the rest of this is just a friction fit for these 2 side pieces. So you just have to get a hold of it on each side and start to work it apart. And don't force it, don't stick a screwdriver or anything, wedge anything in there to get it apart. And if you do need to do that, be very gentle with it, because this plastic or this nylon, you can deform it and you don't want to crack it or anything. But kind of wiggle it back and forth, and you'll see that there's basically just a couple of pins that hold everything together as it goes through here. And here's the bolts. We drop those out. Those are the ones we had loosened here. So let me put those over here. And there it is. That's one complete piece. And you'll see, notice this little pin right here. That comes out, it goes right there. It also goes in the hole right here. The purpose of that is to hold this drive shaft in place as it comes from the lower skeg there up through, and that's what holds this in place. Okay, so you have that. I'm going to put that back in that side. And then as you look at the rest of this, you can see how this operates. So there's in the upper position right there. That is where it locks into the upper unit. As the upper unit fits down in here, it's got a little bar across there, and that kind of locks into that unit. So there it is in the all the way down position. And then there's the halfway position and all the way up into the hole that way. And you'll find that the only thing that's holding this in is it slides onto these 2 1/4-inch pins that are on here. I'm going to go ahead and swing this around first, and we'll finish taking that apart again in a minute. I want to show you something right here. If you look right up here, you can already see that there's a little washer that's coming apart. And I've determined that that, I think, is what was making the grinding, the rubbing sounds. Because I found another piece of one of these laying over near the kayak after I had taken this apart. And I don't know if these are plastic or nylon or Teflon or what they are, but there's a couple really thin washers right there, and they appear to come out, because that noise that I was getting, it almost sounded like that, just kind of a rough metal on metal. And I think that's what was causing my problem this particular time. But let's go ahead and take the rest of this lower piece apart. So you can see there's not too much involved in this. I think it's a really nice design. It seems to be put together fairly well, engineered well. Just got some weak spots that after use they'll have to work out some bugs. But anyway, you'll see you've got 3 across the top here, and then these along the outside of this skeg that holds all this together. So it's just standard Phillips head. I'm going to use a drill to get this out a little quicker. Another potential weak spot, although I guess it's really not, because you don't really have any stress on this trying to pull them apart. But these are little self-tapping stainless screws that are just going directly into the other side, just into plastic, just into a hole in the plastic, and it's self-tapped threads into those. I don't particularly like that. It would be better, in my opinion, had little capture areas on the other side where you could use a stainless nut. So you actually have, have it going into the screws into a nut. But it seems to be holding up so well, and I haven't stripped any. I would not use a drill when you're putting this back together, because you would tend to strip it. Just do a regular screwdriver, hand tight, so you don't strip those out. But you can see where this has already come apart up here, and again, that little pin would go in this little area here to hold this into place right there. And in the back, if you look down under here, I'm going to lift this up, and you can see that there's not too much to it. There's just a area that this whole flexible shaft goes up through. And again, see this pin right up in here? Right there. And it goes in a hole on the other side right here. Anyway, that pin is what holds the drive shaft here in the back and keeps it from moving around, going forwards or backwards. So take that out, put it to the side, don't forget about it, don't lose that. Anyway, after that's out, this whole thing just comes out, and there we have the shaft. This one, you'll see, has not unwound on me. You'll see that right down in here, it has a little washer. Again, it feels like a little piece of Teflon or nylon washer. It's got another one that seems to be attached to this metal shaft. There's not a lot of play, although there's a little bit of play. I'm not sure if the brand new one's like that, or if it gets that after it's had some use on it. And it's got the rubber outside sheath. You'll notice on this particular one that it's got the rubber outside sheath, and then again it's got an internal plastic, maybe a Teflon tube or something, or plastic or rubber. It's not rubber on the inside, but something fairly smooth that the actual metal shaft, that wound metal shaft, goes through. Anyway, the other side here, where it's getting the noise, there's a little spider gear. Work that out of there. The newer, I guess the original ones had holes, and they were held in place by a screw. But if you look up under here, And if you look in there, doesn't seem to be any more washer. There does not seem to be a washer attached to the top of that, or any kind of a nylon or Teflon. So I think that's where my problem was. I think it's this just metal on metal grinding that I was getting, and that would eventually get worse and worse. That seems to be where my problem was. If I look at this one more time, and on this one, yeah, it does have it's got one that you see, if you can look at that real close right there, you can see that it's broken off on this one. That's what I did earlier when I was looking at it. I was trying to lift it up and it cracked and broke off, but it was attached there. And then up here on the top, you'll see that there's another one. So apparently that's to keep the friction down and to keep it from making that grinding sound that I was getting. So there's two of those. And there's nothing left of mine that was making all that noise. So that's what the issue is. Now the problem is, how would you replace that once they break? Doesn't appear to be any way to get that off. Doesn't appear to be a way to get to it, from the other side. So I guess once those deteriorate or wear out, it's time to replace the shaft. And I seem to remember seeing on the Jackson website before that they sold these, and it seemed like it was maybe the $30 or $60 range. I can't really remember. I've got to look at that again. But let me get that out of the way and get back to this. Let me dump those other screws out. Put them over there. All the screws are out. No, they're not. One more. And again, there's the piece and how it works. These little pins actually will come all the way out if you want them to. Again, you just gotta, it's a real tight, fairly precise fit, so you gotta get it. You can't have one coming way up and then do the other one. You gotta kind of move them in increments on both sides to get them to come loose. And there you see it. And these pins, of course, come all the way out too. And these pins here go into, say, that slot right there. And that slot right there. So that's how it fits together, right there to there, and there to there. And this particular one, again, was right here to hold that shaft in place, keep it from moving that direction. These, it's got some little plastic nylon bushings on each end that is the bearing surface on here, keep you from having metal on metal. And then up here on these top pieces, these actually, well, that one's broken. So look at that. So you've got another one right there that's kind of come apart, and that's the bearing surface that goes around here and slides down on that one. So that's how that goes. Anyway, that's how this thing is put together and how it operates. There's not a whole lot to it. Not a whole lot, in my opinion, to really go wrong with it. You can see a little bit of lithium grease they've got on there where these pieces are sliding together, but very little wear and tear on that. And then these little bottom pieces of aluminum is what holds that in place and gives it a little more lateral rigidity, so it's not, swinging back and forth as the propeller goes around, and kind of holds it in place a little bit better and guides it, keeps it up and down straight. Anyway, that's all there is to it. Now, even though this is broken, I'm going to go ahead and reassemble it so everybody can see how it goes back together, and that it does appear to go back together pretty easily. Okay, so get these lined up. This is a little bit harder because I got a broken bushing there, bearing surface on that other one I'm trying to get in place. And just slide the whole thing in there. And that's ready to go. Now, working backwards here, again, you want the little notch here to be facing up in this side, and then it's going to catch there. So let's put this back through here. And you see how that captures it and hold it in place right there. And on the back side, just make sure that it's actually in the middle where it's supposed to be. I'm going to get the pin right here, and let's hold it in place right there. And same thing, snap it down. Seems to be good. And put the screws back in. You start here at the back so this doesn't come loose on me. Again, don't over tighten because that's just going into plastic on the other side, and you definitely will strip it out. Okay, get these last 7 in place. I'll go ahead and say that I am not a kayak expert by any stretch of the imagination. I got my first one less than a couple of years ago. And I guess even calling it a kayak, some people would correct me on that. Maybe that's why Native calls it the Native watercraft. It's more like a small John boat, the one I have, the Titan. And if I had a way to get that drive out of the water a little bit easier, I'd probably still be using that. I'm sort of still on was on my quest for the perfect kayak for my particular shallow water situation around here. And I think I've found the perfect one for me in this Jackson, as long as the drive doesn't keep breaking on me. Anyway, got that back together. See what I'm forgetting here. So this, as you can see, the shaft goes up through the middle there, and again, the little channel there in place for this particular pin. And then again, it just fits on this hole here onto that pin, this pin here into this hole. So you put your fingers on the other side to kind of help align it up. And I think I've got it lined up there, and that seems to be mated together. So this side does not have the capture type hole in it, so this goes in, all 3 of these. And let me flip this up. And I'm going to put these in, orient them the right way. And it's nice, it's a good tight fit, so they're not going to flop around on you or anything. And then the best way to probably hold those is just find something, a little socket or a screwdriver or something to push on the other side to kind of hold that in place. Get your Allen wrench again, line it up, and you just need to have something to push against that nut to get it started. This is actually not holding anything in place. Once you get it started, that's all there is to it. So again, just to have something to bear against, get the thread started and tight. And you can see that the as I tighten this up, the gap between the pieces will pull together. And I've got all three of those done. And then the final piece of the assembly process was back on this side, on the top. And that's a matter of getting your bungee attached all the way through. A little acorn lock nut. Yeah, it's not sticking through a lot, so that's a 3/8. So on this one you need a 3/8 on both sides. Something to hold this side. And that's done. So, got it all back together. You can see that you turn the coupling there, everything's working. You can kind of hear that grinding sound that I was because I have no bearing surface in there. And T-track again, back on here. Tighten that back up, and I guess I will save this one for parts. And maybe I can order a new replacement shaft, so if I have a problem again, I won't have to wait a few days for parts to come in or for a replacement to come in. Anyway, I hope that gave you all a little bit of helpful information about how these are put together. There's the source of my problem, I think, right there with those bearing washers or nylon nuts or whatever they are that had broken and come apart. And I'll put at the very end of the video a picture. Like I said, they did not have out there, and I'd even requested a exploded parts diagram to sort of show how this is all put together and what parts and components you can order, and he said they did not have that, although he did send me a photo of the latest 3D upper unit broken apart to show the extra grease ports on it and show how the pieces in that and the gearing and the better, heavier duty better machine gearing that he said they're using now mates together and works, and how all that looks on the inside, because I had not taken one of those apart. I did not want to take one of those apart. It looks like it uses a rubber seal along the outside of that aluminum casting to keep the water out and everything. So once you take that apart, you probably have to replace that seal, and not something that I would do. Would not want to avoid the warranty or anything, but this was the broken one they told me to go ahead and get rid of or keep for parts, so that's why I felt comfortable going ahead and taking it apart. Hope this was helpful. So I just realized that these bearing washers that I talked about up here, especially on the one side that was making all the noise and grinding, probably can be replaced, or should be able to be replaced, if maybe coming at it from the other side. So let's take a look at that real quick and take the prop off and see if, like I would suspect you should be able to do is somehow get to those little plastic nylon washers and get those replaced. Okay, I've never had to replace the prop on one of these before. There's the little shear pin, holds that in place, and we have a, looks like that fits in one particular direction, and there is one of the little plastic nylon bearing washers on this end, and you can see here there is another one. It just seems to be attached to this metal piece right, oh, there we go. You can see it on there where those two surfaces rub together. I don't think it's permanently attached. I think it's probably just stuck on there from the water and the salt. And there again you can see that flexible shaft and how that sort of unwound on me. And look, yeah, it looks like I'll be able to push it through. Let's see what's happening on this end. See if it'll go all the way through there. Oh, that's interesting. It really, the winding on that really blew apart. And came apart. Okay. Well, there's the whole shaft. And you can see where that, I think he told me that the new one, the new design has some design differences, and it's also wound in a different direction to help with that problem. So yeah, looks like that washer would be able to go all the way. You can just find a source for those. If that's not blown apart there, you could get it over and up to this end. And again, you can see on this surface here, there is one still. This was the, yeah, so there's one there. Okay, there it is. Get a better look at it there. I'm not sure what the outside and inside diameter of that washer is, but I'm sure you could find replacements for those as needed and get those replaced. Well, hopefully that's given everybody an idea, a little better understanding of how the Flex Drive is put together and how it functions, and how some of these parts and components could be replaced as necessary. And I guess that'll do it. So I will sign off now. Thank you. So just a couple quick still shots of the new 3D upper drive assembly, and you can see the new grease ports in that, and then an image that one of the Jackson technicians sent me of it cracked open, so you can see the internal gearing and how all that's put together.